People have logged in. We'll be starting very shortly at 10 o'clock. My name's Diana Thompson, so welcome to the webinar today. It's a very strange experience, obviously, for me to be a public speaking coach and a presenter with absolutely no audience interaction apart from on Slido. That's the advantage of having the great technology, but I'm used to Zoom when I do these sorts of things, so I get to see other people's faces, and in this system I don't. So I am adapting to the technology like many of us, and what we are working with as well in these different times. I appreciate that many of you are probably a bit over these sorts of meetings. So as we just welcome everybody else in and people are logging in, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Diana Thompson, as you might have seen from the promotion. My company is called Speech Marks Coaching. I'm a public speaking coach. I do a little bit of MC work. I also do keynotes at conferences. And last year I wrote a book because I felt there was a gap in the market, which has just been relaunched this year under a completely different title for reasons that won't bore you with, called Anyone Can Speak Confidently. So today we will have about a 40 to 45 minute sort of presentation, followed by some Q&A. I understand you're all familiar with Slido and that you can type and ask questions on Slido. The topic today is developing leadership through public speaking. I've noticed in my years as a public speaking mentor and coach that there is a lot of leadership, great leadership courses out there. I've been on 2 myself over my former career, and most of them have nothing or very little with public speaking in mind, which surprises me. And you'll see why over the next 15 minutes in particular, why I feel that there is such an should be an emphasis on public speaking and generally verbal communication within the realms of leadership. As I said, I'm a public speaking coach, keynote speaker, author, and workshop presenter. I was originally a Bachelor of Property Administration graduate from Auckland University and worked for 15 years in the property sector as a commercial real estate agent, as a real manager. My management portfolios included Firestone New Zealand, Vodafone, Flight Centre, and as I went on maternity leave, I was the National Property Manager for Genesis Energy. So very much in the property sector. I'm married to a senior property general manager here in Auckland, and still have many friends and colleagues in the property industry. So it's a real pleasure for me to present and help the Spatial and Survey Institute and anybody else that's joined in today. So thank you very much for joining us. As I said, this is about thinking about how when you develop your leadership skills at a junior level or even as a senior level, that you actually think about your public speaking and your verbal communication. And I hope to give you lots of ideas that you can take away and apply within your own business, within the wider industry that you work in or industries, and your community as well, because these are skills that you can take within your community, whether you're on local boards or school boards or other sort of charities. I'm really passionate about helping people speak up, find their voice and become confident speakers. And I help people that are just trying to get their confidence, but also so that they can come on to speak at conferences and have their story told or share their knowledge. The aim for today is that you could take some really good applicable things and action points that you can apply. I have done a quick agenda for you. The agenda is follows. Where does speaking fit into leadership? What are the speaking skills that you may need? And how are you going to improve them? And I've got some different ideas from a lot of other people, but I'll show you some of the more common ones. I'll try and remember to recap at each of those as we finish those and ask questions, but I want you to know that we will look at, but how do I improve as we get to the end of this. As I said, the questions and answers as we go can go on to Slido, and I can stop and have a look at those as needed. We will have questions and answers. I have had someone say that I don't appear to have sound. We've tested this, so we think we might have that sorted. It might be someone else's. Someone else has said they don't have issues, so it could be your end. I'm sorry. Okay, let's get going. So speaking and leadership. Let's just take a step back and say, well, where does this all fit in? Speaking and verbal skills are part of your soft skills, and this is, I've got and summarized from a lot of research by Harvard, by Stanford University's Carnegie Foundation. I'm sure there's variations on it, but within a broad reach, there is that an understanding now that your technical skills only contribute around, it varies from profession to profession, 15% of your professional success. Not day-to-day success, but your overall career and professional success. The rest is all those soft skills, those people skills. How do you get on with people, interact? Do they trust you? Are you someone that they want to work with? So it's really important to think of, yes, I've got my technical skills and I do my CPD points and I make sure I keep up with technology and I make sure that I do things to the professional standard, but also work on your soft skills, your people skills. It reminded me when I was getting the slide done that there's a man called Simon Sinek, one of the most amazing speakers and business presenters I've ever come across, with a really funny TED Talk. And this is how he became really well known, because it's about the third most watched TED Talk in the world, that said, the theme of it was, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So if they trust you, if they like you, if they subscribe to your brand, if they get on with you, then it's almost irrelevant what you do, particularly if you do the same thing that so many other people do. And that all comes into good marketing, obviously, but also great soft skills. So let's find out what these soft skills are and where does public speaking fit in. Soft skills. Now, I've Googled this because I know that's what loads of us do these days. I'm not an HR person in training, so this is one of many images you could find on Google if you did the same thing. But I think it's a really nice one because it doesn't limit what soft skills are. It's quite interesting. And you will see up there that on the top left-hand side there is communication, empathy, coaching and mentoring, personality development. I probably should have drilled a bit deeper into how we develop our own personality, but I think it comes in understanding yourself. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? How do you communicate? Do you value other people being on time? And moving down towards that 4 o'clock position, motivation, 6 o'clock down there's negotiations. Fantastic. Definitely, again, one of those skills that some people will need more than others. Time management and creativity. And again, creativity might not really come into some of your soft skills that you use a lot. Obviously, it doesn't mean creative accounting. But the key thing here is that whilst communication is up there as a separate soft skill, you'll start to realize that, in fact, other areas will use verbal communication in particular, written as well. You'll find it very hard to motivate a team if you can't communicate with them well. And coaching and mentoring and empathy, really, you can't do any of that by email. You have to speak to people to really create those. So if that's just your sort of Joe average middle manager soft skill set, what is a leadership skill set? And it does change a little bit as leadership positions are taken on. And again, there's many variations on this, and I've split it out and you'll see why. To a certain extent, you're going to start in a more senior leadership role be required to do, particularly those two blue ones on the right, which is strategic thinking and planning and delivery. You're going to be expected to think more long-term, think what are some of the areas in business that we're going into. And I'm sure there are many of you on this call and within your business that have probably spent an inordinate amount of time in the last month on strategic thinking, planning, delivery. How do we pivot? How do we change? How do we deliver things? And potentially you've had to pull on some creative solutions. Next up, and many people will know this from experience, that they become, as they move into leadership roles and head of departments or head of teams, they start to become people managers. So their soft skills start to come off the technical and delivery side and move into people management, team service mindset, change management. But overriding all of these, again, is communication. Communicating this change management, the strategy to people, and being a leader, having people follow, having people believe in you is most definitely some of the skill set that we need as leaders. And, you know, anybody, I'm pretty sure you've all seen comparisons at the moment between how different leaders are handling COVID-19. You know, Jacinda Ardern was very popular, particularly within New Zealand, but also some of my international friends just were amazed with how she's handled the Christchurch attacks, and then Whakaari White Island. And now they're also saying this woman is incredible. Now, of course, she's not alone. There are other people that have handled this with great admiration around the world. And then look, let's say it now, Donald Trump, who is just cannon fodder for people, for examples on how not to communicate with people. So if we can take those two extremes and think about those. As I said, there's many varieties of what leadership soft skills should be. And as I was doing my research on my audience and who you are and what your industry involves, I did find your own president, Rebecca Strang's profile, and it led me to this website, My 3 Words, Leadership Stories of Exceptional Women. And they ask in there, you know, tell us, what does leadership mean to you? And if we drill down to this a little bit closer, you can see that definitions and what they've found leadership to mean is different maybe from what the previous slide said. So you can see that collaboration they felt was a core leadership requirement. Courage and integrity, interesting. I didn't expect necessarily those to have such weight. So the bigger the words are, the more times people have put them in as their 3 words. Empathy is obviously very important there. Inspirational and encouragement down the very bottom. So just understand that everybody's version of what a good leader is or what leadership is can vary. So I just challenge you, as we stop here, and check up on questions, if you'd like to put them through on Slido now, that what is the kind of leader that you want to be is the key here, and how is it that you want to be perceived, and where do you want to put your emphasis? Is it in that you're a collaborative leader, or you're one that has a passion and inspiration? So if there aren't any questions on sort of setting the scene, I'll move into the nitty-gritty of public speaking and how it plays such a core role in leadership. So public speaking, what is it? Well, when we talk about public speaking, or people think of it, they instantly think of these 3 things. They'll shout out, it's when you're speaking, it's when you're doing presentations, oh, it's when you're presenting at a conference. And absolutely, they are the public speaking, the traditional public speaking versions that we think of. But public speaking is is a subset of verbal communication. And I believe that if we work on our verbal communication, our public speaking will become a lot more easier and natural to us. And just to set that scene, the only definition I've really found of when are you going from speaking to public speaking is when are you speaking to greater than your nuclear family. So, for example, I grew up in a family of 4, and I'm now a parent, and we are a family of 4. So when I start to speak to 5 or more people, that could be my definition of public speaking. But verbal communication, of course, has lots of other applications. We use verbal communication in meetings. But some of those meetings might be, for me, more than 4 people. Therefore, I'm using public speaking skills. We certainly use them when we're networking because we're demonstrating confidence and communication skills where we're wanting to listen and talk to people. But we also use public speaking skills even in job interviews. And the emphasis of my book that I've written is that if you work on your public speaking skills when you're in safer environments, particularly in your own business, then you can start to be more aware of what you're doing as far as how you would present to a larger meeting or even do a more formal speech. So use those impromptu conversations, those impromptu mini speeches, I call them, to really work on some of those public speaking skills. And if you start to think about the fact that you do these in a normal situation, not in lockdown, but certainly in a normal situation, then you're doing those all the time. And in fact, I've seen people possibly get a little bit more relaxed as they do online meetings, Zoom calls and things like that. And I'd encourage people to continue to take a quite tidy, formal approach to their work meetings anyway, not the virtual catch-up drink ones. So in work context, under normal circumstances, these are some of the times that we may use our public speaking skills and be unaware of them. The team meetings, those one-on-one conversations. We could practice, develop, and learn public speaking skills if we have bigger company meetings. But we can also practice vocal variety when we're on phone calls. And I often joke with my younger audiences that the millennials should go back to basics and start using phone calls as one of their first ways to develop their vocal variety. And they sort of reluctantly kind of go, oh, I don't like talking on the phone. But let's face it, you get a lot more done if you can call someone and you get a better connection than via email. The next level would be with your clients. So now you're doing meetings. They could be far more important as far as winning business, making a pitch, presenting your findings, and again, those phone calls. But you can use public speaking skills to your advantage in any of these scenarios. Fee negotiations, if that's something that you do, presenting your reports. And my next webinar with you in July is actually all about meetings and developing your public speaking skills so you can deliver a really great meeting, whether it's internal or external. And then, of course, those external things. Public speaking, networking, conferences, meetings, phone calls, all of these are opportunities to grow your leadership, present your findings, your projects, show your competence, your confidence, and take up new roles such as on boards and committees where you really start to gain visibility. And that's one of the things that I really work with a lot of women about, is gaining visibility through having more confident public speaking skills and taking up opportunities. Because if you are willing to take on the conference keynote, that is going to get you a lot of exposure and credibility. And because I think about this a lot, I thought, well, how do you figure out where you are and where you want to go, because one of the roles of a coach is to really figure out what is a client's goal. The goal here is different from everyone, and I know this has got a lot of writing on it, so just if I can draw your attention down the bottom and say, I know you've all got step 1, everyday conversations and phone calls, meetings, networking to a certain extent. I'm sure you've all got on step 2, you don't mind introducing other people. You can do that traditional elevator pitch. This is what I do. This is who I work with, and answering Q&A. But if you're not on step 3, then that's certainly your next goal, to make sure that you can do short speeches, deliver in meetings, maybe say a thank you or a farewell, be okay to speak on a panel. But leadership really comes in step 4 or 5, where you're doing client pitches, you might be running an AGM or speaking at an AGM. Or more up into the conference presentation or running a workshop. And this is where that leadership, all those other leadership skills will start to combine, and then you deliver them in a public speaking way. Just had a quick question. Will I be providing the slides post-presentation? It's being recorded, so it will be available for people. But by all means, feel free to take a screenshot. I can't see you doing that. Just if you've got your phone nearby, or you can do a screenshot, you're welcome to do that. There will be some useful things available for you to download also. So what I want to just say to you is, if you're moving into leadership, figure out where you want to be with your verbal communication and public speaking. How long you want it to take. Like, for example, I'm going to speak at next year's conference, at the 2021 conference. So I'm going to start getting some training now, and I'm going to start doing small presentations and taking up more opportunities, or asking for opportunities, so that I'm ready. Because like learning an instrument or getting good at a sport, getting good at public speaking, for the vast majority of us, myself included, took time and it took practice, and it took some failures along the way. I called them failures, but most people said it wasn't, just wasn't your best work. So have a goal in mind, make sure it's got a time frame, and really actually say, this is going to be part of my development. I encourage some people to see if they can put it into their professional development plan with their managers as well. So I'm now going to just focus specifically on characteristics of speakers who are leaders. And this is really the sort of the guts of it, if you will. Characteristics of speakers who are leaders. Again, there'll be versions of this, but I think all of these cover it. So I think we can agree that leaders are frequently people that seem to motivate and lead teams, but they do this by using encouraging language. And our politicians, again, are showing this at the moment. But encouraging language can often be the difference. Dictatorial, you will do this, versus I really ask everybody to take some time to, or as Jacinda Ardern's been saying, variations on that. So encouraging language, we're doing really well, but we need to reach these targets. We need to collaborate. But this is where some of the options of public speaking training that I'll cover in the next section are really important, because some of them systems of learning public speaking skills will provide you with opportunities to do what's called the commend, recommend, commend. Now, many people that are starting to train to manage teams and manage people and sort of move into that HR kind of semi-role, they learn to commend, recommend, commend. So there's this sort of encouraging thing. You did this really well. I feel that you need to do this. Or they might say, I noticed that you did this certain job this way. We've found that it's actually more effective if you do it this way. So it's not it's a criticism in some ways of what you did, but it's actually more of an observation, and a why we feel something should be done a different way, or why you should. I'll do it for public speaking. So in feedback for people that are delivering speeches and presentations, I might say, I've noticed that as you got more comfortable, your hands came apart, but initially they were very much closed in. This is closed body language, shows that you're nervous and cuts off your audience. It's very natural, but if you could find a way to be more open right from the beginning, and I've got some hints for you, you'll find that you'll relax more quickly. So you give a reason why something needs to change, and preferably the better way of doing something. And that is encouraging whilst giving the feedback that this wasn't the best way of doing something. The next thing is that many leaders will get to a point quickly, and they may deliver it with a lot of courage and conviction and clarity. Very infrequently will someone become an outstanding leader if they waffle, they don't have conviction. I hesitate to use the word passion. I'm passionate about what I do, but it doesn't mean that everybody in their jobs and their roles needs to display passion all the time. But maybe conviction is a appropriate word here in our professional life. And clarity. They've really thought about what they needed to say and how they were going to say it so that the audience would understand and that they will get to the point quickly. So they don't spend a lot of time waffling around and flipping and flopping. They've practiced it, they've rehearsed it, they've got conviction, they know exactly what they need to say. Now, frequently, this, and for good leaders, will just sound like it's come off the cuff, that they've just so relaxed about it. But that's either through years of practice, or it's through literally practice. And I'm not speaking out of turn, because it's in black and white in my book that we have that in our house, where we know that Dad walks around the house talking to himself, but really what he's doing is he's rehearsing a conversation and a meeting that he's going to have that day. And quite often, all the things that he rehearsed and all the things that he could have said never came off, but he was prepared and ready. And that's potentially how many leaders work, where they've practiced and rehearsed. Next thing is down the bottom there, they may tell a meaningful story, but they have impactful and meaningful, memorable messages. Storytelling is really huge now for conference speakers, and we'll talk about that in the next webinar in a lot more detail. But sticky messages are often another way of saying impactful and memorable messages. In the National Speakers Association, we have an adage which says, every point should have a story, and every story should have a point. So leaders don't go waffling off and telling us about something that happened if there isn't a quick, succinct point that they want to demonstrate. And they often share their point and get across their message by telling a customer story, or there was a time when story. So think about how you may start to use past project or customer stories that have meaningful, that are applicable, that are to the point, and how you could weave that into some of the opportunities you have to speak or present, even if it's just in a team meeting. Have them relevant and have them a little bit well rehearsed, so that they're clear and they're to the point. I often talk about a lady that I'm in a networking business with, and every meeting she comes to, we have a thing called a 1-minute promo speech. In every meeting, she is clear and she's concise. She's got a great customer story, and you just think, wow, she's the person I'd want if I needed one of her. So really think about how you may be able to develop some more sticky messages that are impactful and memorable, and that maybe there's a little storytelling weaving around that. And as I said, the next section of this will definitely focus on how you can do that. Another one, obviously a leader is ready to present on a stage or in front of a large room. And for the most of us, we need to have a lot of rehearsal to be okay with that. To be really good, we need to have had a sort of either some experience and, had a bad experience, what we'd call a bad experience, because we just stood there and gripped hold of the lectern and didn't move from it. Or we've had experience where we've gone from smaller meeting room to bigger meeting room to maybe a hall. And then the next one we presented, we were, instead of being on the floor, we were on a stage. And then the next one we went to a large stage, standing up on the stage. It's when we get thrown in the deep end and all of a sudden we're standing on a stage looking at 1,000 people that any one of us will feel really terrified. It's completely natural, but many leaders have made sure that they have had opportunities to go from a smaller meeting room to a larger meeting room to a bigger meeting and so forth, so that they've got used to how they will speak and what they need to do. And of course, they've got some training and they've been to a course or a workshop where they've got more exposure and more techniques and learned ideas on how they can deliver. The next one is very underrated. I want you to really think about this one. Leaders who speak well, listen to feedback and listen to other people. Listening is such an underrated skill, and many courses will not ever talk about listening skills. And it's one of the things that I really got a lot of value out of when I did Toastmasters courses, is listening to other people speak. You can learn a lot from them, but when you're actively listening to other people, you will really find that you'll get a lot more out of your own presentation. So if you are getting into more leadership positions, make listening and really present, active listening one of the skills that you want to be known for. I'll talk about that when I get to recommendations on how to improve your speaking as well. But it's a really easy one to start to adopt, and you can just Google active listening and you can find out lots of ideas for it. And I'll also be providing some ideas for that in the next session that we're having on meetings, which is on a quick tips page like that. The final one I want to highlight is something that's a common characteristics of leaders when they're speaking, is this one. They can deal with interruptions, questions, or disagreements with ease. Now, unfortunately, these are always going to happen. Interruptions could just be a fire engine going past, and you have to stop what you're saying and allow that noise to go on, and then pick up and continue on. Obviously, interruptions could be someone heckling or laughing or saying, "That's nonsense, I totally disagree." It might not be an actual question. Again, leaders have developed the skill to go, okay, thank you, I'll get to the next point and you'll probably understand why. And the questions, again, are a skill that you can learn. Do you deal with the question as it's posed? Or do you say, thank you for the question, you'll find I'll cover that next? Do you say, that's a valid question. I'd like to address that at Q&A if you don't feel I covered it in the next 10 minutes. Or do you just continue on? Sometimes you just have to continue on over interruptions. And you get used to not sort of going, oh, you're going to turn that phone off, are you? I'm going to, I don't know if many of you've come across Leonie Freeman, who's now the CEO of the Property Council. Leonie, I knew from my property career, but really got to know in the last 4 years when we were both members of the National Speakers Association, or PSA, Professional Speakers Association. And she had spent a lot of time developing her public speaking skills. I mean, time and training, and she's a wonderful speaker. She's got a great story to tell. And she became more comfortable on larger stages. Now, Leonie tells a story where she was delivering her keynote about helping Auckland, in particular in New Zealand, with the housing crisis. And she was playing a video, and she looked out to her audience, and she saw someone just go, and a slightly elderly woman, still all in her winter coats, had fell forward and completely just fainted. And she showed true leadership and great public speaking skills when, before the video even stopped, she'd got down onto the floor and helped within the audience and got that person, started to get her looked after. When the video stopped, she was able to say, this has happened, we're just going to have to deal with this until she's okay. And then she got everybody back in the room, settled back down, and continued on with her presentation. And, you know, leaders have to get used to these sorts of things and be able to pick up and carry on. So happy for you if you want to take a screenshot of it, or write down what is the 2 things that you really want to develop in your leadership style, and some of the things that you think are probably your biggest challenges. If you want to say to me, yeah, there's no way how am I going to get better at this? By all means, slot that into Slido. I've got it here in front of me. So I'm just going to now talk a little bit about some of the things that you'll need when you're speaking. I've divided up to 3 pillars of verbal communication. There's probably arguably about 7 or 8, but 3 is a magic number when we're speaking. So I always like to demonstrate some of the things that I teach people, and 3 is the magic number when it comes to speaking. Every good presentation should be divided into 3. If you recall the agenda, I divided it into 3 key areas, and it's the same with this. And there's another reason. I'll talk to this soon. So the key pillar is your message and your content. What is it that you're including? What's not going to be included, because we have to edit out some things. And then how are you going to deliver it? What kind of voice are you going to bring to the speech and the presentation? How much passion are you going to show? Or are you going to speak in a monotone sort of, I'm just not really interested in delivering this to you, but I have to kind of voice? So maybe that's your area that you have to work on, using more vocal variety. And it's certainly an area that I work on with some of my female clients, because there's umpteen surveys and things that will indicate that people like to hear a deeper tonal voice, because that sounds more authoritative, not so deep that no one can really concentrate on it hard. So some people have to work on the depth and their timbre of their voice. But putting in more enthusiasm is always a good idea. And then the other really big component is the delivery. So that means the delivery, what you're saying with your face. You know, do you look bored, or do you look like you actually want to tell people what you need to tell them? There's the body language. So in a normal situation, whether you be on a stage or just at the front of a meeting room, what's your body conveying and how much of a message are you conveying with that? Now, I just want to mention that there is a well discussed misquoted percentages on the what influences your message and what people remember. And it's got to the point where it was so commonly misquoted that the professor that was head of the research, Professor Albert Mehrabian, actually said, look, this is being misquoted. The quote that was that 7% of the message that people hear and understand is in the words, and 38% of the message is in the vocal variety and variation that a speaker uses, and 55%, half of what you say, is all in your physical delivery. And he said, no, this only applies if you're talking about feelings, attitudes, and things like that. When you are talking about data, research, your report, the AGM minutes last year, that has got a huge quantity of what people will remember is in the message and the content. However, whether you can keep them awake and engaged for the other 20 minutes will depend on your vocal variety and delivery. So whilst in a professional sense, your message and your content and your visuals, so your slides, are extremely important and could be up to 50% of what people need to know, remember, and hear, whether they really enjoy it and whether they want to remember or apply it can often come down to great vocal variation and delivery. So please just understand that. And different people have different strengths. And a good speaking course and good training will work on all three of these. So quick pause and recap for any questions. I'm going to get on to pop them up there on Slido as we go. Let's talk about courses. The public courses open to anyone. The most well-known by far and away is Toastmasters International. I started my training there. I think that given that it's all across the country and in larger cities, you can choose a morning one, a lunchtime club, or an evening club. You can choose one in the city. You can choose them in the suburbs. There's a lot of variety, and particularly in the bigger centres. And they do great things like help teach you how to deliver good feedback with that commend, recommend, commend system. They are really great at getting you to practice listening skills and then short speeches and impromptu speeches. I do think there's still a great place for people that have thought about Toastmasters but not really done it. What I would caution people on is, if you have a choice, have a look at a couple and make sure that the one you join is actually the one that's going to challenge you the most, that's got people who are distinguished Toastmasters or professional speakers or coaches or trainers. But another word of warning, don't get sucked into speaking like a Toastmaster. That is a thing, and I have been told it myself years ago, and it means that people get told, this is the way you speak and this is what you do. You must count off on your fingers like that when you talk about three things. And people start to look and sound like a Toastmaster. What you want to look and sound like, what you want to be as a leader, is the best version of yourself, not the version that someone else that's not a professional speaker or public speaking coach has told you and made you do at a Toastmasters meeting. You're great. You're a leader. So just be the best version of yourself when you get up to speak. Interestingly, there has now been a trend worldwide that I wouldn't say I've been at the forefront of myself, but there's also quite specific subgroups of public speaking. And the one that I do, and that's the only reason I feel like I'm comfortable putting my logo up, but there are different variations on this. My She Says So is a woman's only course. Toastmasters, however, when I lived in Singapore, had English clubs, Mandarin clubs, Malay clubs, and I'm sure many other countries will have that as well. I competed against someone from Thailand in the English competition, but of course most of their clubs were Thai speaking. But now we're getting into specialized clubs that might work with particular companies. My one's gender specific. Other ones are specific to different other minorities, and people may find that is more suitable for them. So, while I said Toastmasters is great, definitely look at it as an option. It's a really low cost entry. Have a look at what may also be in your location or a virtual one that may serve you better, that you may feel more comfortable in, because the key here is that you get up, you deliver prepared speeches, you take on feedback, and you improve, because you will not improve sitting at the back of the room and not participating. And also, if you can find somewhere where you can speak in a large to a larger audience, that's also really beneficial. There's also loads of different courses out there, 1 or 2 day workshops. Again, this is just one that I did a while ago with a company called Audience Alive, but friend and colleague, David Nottage, he does a lot of public courses. So on his website, he advertises public courses. Public courses are obviously open to the public, and they're at when and where the presenter wants to do them. So there's some, that could be quite good if you need to go on a weekend course. 1 day course, crash course will go by in a flash. I think 2 days should be what you're looking at. What I tend to do now with businesses that I work with, so I deliver to their teams, is I actually do it 2 hours every week for 3 or 4 weeks, depending on what modules they want, so that in between the modules they go away, they practice it, they say, oh, that was really good, I'm really glad you told us that last week because I used it. And also it means that you have your people actually saying, I can only afford 2 hours. I've got one set of clients in a large real estate firm, and they've got phone calls and emails backed up after 2 hours. They want out. So that's another good option. Find out if there's a good public course, whether they'll do it in-house or you can get a group of people together and do it together. Now, you can also develop public speaking skills online, and I've put that at your own pace, but often never finished. I am a bit of a junkie as far as the books go. If you can see these are just 2 of the books that I've got. This one specializes on body language. This was interesting because it was about TED Talks, but again, not finished because their relevance to me was limited. So let's have a look at online courses. This is one I signed up for and didn't finish the course. Chris Anderson's on public speaking. He's the head of TED, if you like. That was the book I held up just then. And look, I just put in public speaking and 5,404 online courses on public speaking. I have one as well, but I don't advertise it because there's so much competition out there. So you really need to look at the reviews, figure out what it is that you need to develop, which areas do you need to develop, and will that course get the results you want. So here's the books. That was Chris Anderson's TED Talks. There's even a guy that's got nothing to do with TED Talks that have done that's written a book about TED Talks. Another book that he's done, Carmen Carlo, did one on Steve Jobs and why he was such a good presenter. So there's lots of really good books. I've mentioned my one. I originally called mine The Naked Speaker. Big British publishing firm didn't like that title, so we've now called it Anyone Can Speak. So both of these, there's, as I said, loads of different books. I've got quite a few on my Kindle, a few of which I've finished as well. The thing is that unlike Toastmasters, unlike a really good course, They don't give you any feedback on how you're speaking. They just give you ideas that you could implement. So that's why even in this, I'm saying, look, you need to have a look at some ideas of where you can practice. I, however, also have a different philosophy in my book, Anyone Can Speak Confidently. Daily practice. I mentioned it before, and I'm going to reiterate it again. You've got loads of opportunities to practice. Take hold of them and actively practice. Your vocal variety maybe one week, your body language another time. Have you got your content right? Can you read a book and improve your content for next time? And if you've got a big event, if you've got a conference, get some coaching from a person like myself or David Nottage or someone that's actually coached people into delivering keynote presentations. Just to flick back again, I'd also suggest that if you're going to attend a workshop or have in-house training, make sure it's a company that specializes and is specifically all about public speaking coaching. I had a friend that gave me a manual and said this was the biggest waste of 2 days of my life because it wasn't a company that specialized. They did a whole raft of different kind of training, and this was just one module that someone had to learn and deliver. So get a specialist on board because your time's valuable. And as I found with Toastmasters, getting rid of what's considered bad habits is harder than acquiring them. So we're going into recap. Again, if you've got some questions for Slido, please give those to me now. I'll refer to them. But I'm going to recap. So I told you what I was going to tell you in the agenda. I've told you, and now I'm going to tell you what I told you. That's a technique I use with all of the structures of presentations. They are verbal communications. They're essential for leadership. Absolutely make them a priority as you're moving through onto bigger leadership roles. You use and practice public speaking skills every day. So please make it a conscious use and conscious practice. You can improve your public speaking skills. Sign up for Toastmasters, a different kind of course if that's what you feel comfortable with, a 2-day course if that's what you need, or try an online course. You know, we've potentially got another couple of weeks of predominantly working from home. Maybe now's the time to look at that online course. But the great thing is you're going to use your public speaking skills in a variety of situations, and they will distinguish you as a leader if you use them well. So we're just coming to the end. As I said, you can flick up anything on Slido. If you've got any questions, I won't say what your name is. I'll just call out the question. But you're welcome again to take a screenshot. I did want to mention as we wrap up here that this is the first of the 3 webinars that I'm doing with Survey and Spatial. On the 3rd of July, speaking and meetings, and that's the one where I'm really going to be drilling down into facilitating difficult discussions and being persuasive. And again, those are really specifics of leadership. And I was thinking about putting them in today, but there was a lot to cover. So I'm going to put them in speaking and meetings, being persuasive, and also facilitating difficult discussions. And then for something a little bit more lighthearted, when we're back into networking, is coincidence we chose this time frame in February, but it's perfectly going to be let's get back into networking, going to events, interacting, and seeing what else we can do and how we can network better. I have one question here. I think a manager leads by authority, a leader by example. Is there a place for authority? Again, I'm not a leadership specialist. It's not my area of expertise, but I do agree that managerial leadership traditionally has been authority, and a leader distinguishes himself from a manager by example, rallying the troops. It's quite a fluid area, I think, at the moment, would be my response to that. And I think finding out from leadership specialists would be a good idea if that's something that you're interested in. I think leaders, I think managers, personally, I think managers also do a lot by example. We won't necessarily do what a manager tells us if we don't feel like they don't walk the talk. So those are the two meetings that are webinars that I'll be facilitating coming up. Happy to take email questions if you want to have a private question. Here's my contact details. I'm more than happy to field questions. You know, Diana, I was listening on your webinar and I just realized I didn't ask this question, or I wanted to ask this question. But most importantly, if you go to my website, you can get How to Calm Your Nerves from the book. It currently says From the Naked Speaker, which is what, as I said, was Anyone Can Speak Confidently is the repackaged book. But don't be like going, oh, that's a different book. It's the same book content, essentially. This webinar was supposed to be originally in another 2 weeks, so we hadn't quite got the website all updated. My apologies for that being so confusing, but you can get the whole chapter free of charge, How to Calm your speaking nerves. The other thing you can get off the top of the website is the top tips, and the top tips is it includes PowerPoint top tips, answering questions, body language, networking. So a lot of the stuff that we will be covering in the next couple of weeks, and you can download that free of charge. I've got a question here. What's your advice for practicing public speaking in the real world where we may not have exposure to large groups and stage opportunities? Yeah, good question. That's why something like Toastmasters is really good, because you have an audience there. The rest of the club, they're all there to do the same thing, and it is a way of getting some topics and telling stories, writing a speech and getting that practice. Now, sometimes you can do a speech about that can kind of be work related, but often you're just getting what we call exposure to standing up and speaking, and that's a great way to practice. I say to other people, if that's not something you want to do, could you do it as a family unit around the dinner table? Could that be one of your things in lockdown at the moment, where you go away and research a topic? Friends of mine are doing research a topic and come back, and they kind of do a bit of a debating style, but you could actually just do this as something in lockdown that you do with the people in your bubble, and that's a great way to get exposure at the moment. But you can do it. You can actually say, if you have small meetings with teams, do you know what? I would really love us all to get better at public speaking. How about we each do a 2-minute speaking slot and we stand up? So we actually, instead of sitting around the table all together, we stand up and we get used to this concept of standing in front of an audience of 5. As I said, the audience doesn't have to be huge, but just the physical standing up and speaking, particularly speaking without notes in front of you, is great practice. And other times you might find you just have to stand up and speak to your bubble or join a different community event. So I don't know, hopefully that answers that question. And as I said, more than happy to field questions from the email, and I would really hope to see you all at the next one, which is on public speaking and speaking in meetings. We'll cover preparation. We'll be looking at specific areas of interest. And on that note, if you've got, could you cover this in your next webinar, Diana? I'd really be keen to find out. I'd love to hear from people. If you've got some topics you'd like me to cover, I struggle in meetings to do this, then let me know. I'm more than happy to include whatever you would like in that for the next webinar. So thank you very much. Lovely to have you here. And I hope that you've got some great content out of it and that you can take it back to your bubble, to your company, to your team, and you can see a way forward to using public speaking as a way to develop your leadership presence and your abilities to become a leader within your company, your industry, or your community. Thank you very much for your time.